Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent. Rotation's right around the corner. Festival of Legends will be giving us a lot of new cards for every class. Rotation will happen, taking away cards, adding some new ones, and buffing some old ones. And at the end of this video, as always, I'll be going through and talking about the current meta decks, how they change, what I expect to show up as a result of the new cards. But in this case, I need to start it differently. Because all of these new cards, a lot of them are about the overheal mechanic, which is new. And importantly, a lot of the overheal cards that are very important to the idea of playing this are core set cards that have been added for the first time. So coming over to the core set to start this off, we're losing Murazond, Lyra, the Coltiran Chaplain, Focused Will, Power Infusion. No big losses so far, but Radiant Elemental and Northshire Cleric are big blows to the class. Now, personally, I'm glad to see them going. Northshire Cleric and Radiant Elemental have been dominant and oppressive at what they do for a long time, and the class has largely been designed around them. I'm glad to see them getting out of the spotlight and letting something else get tried for once. Now, the new cards for the Priest core set are wild. They have one of the best incoming core rotations there is. They have Katrina Morte, who now only works on Undead. Don't know if I feel strongly about her, but Dark Bishop Benedictus is not rotating. The Shadow Hero Power archetype is not going out like we thought it might be. Instead, it's becoming an evergreen part of the game, or at least currently it's being in the core set. What is evergreen is tradable. The best signage in the game, Shara the Naru, is staying in Priest. It's not rotating either. They're also getting Shadow Ascendant just to fill out that Undead curve, but they're getting 3 new cards. Well, they may as well be new cards. Holy Champion's just completely reworked as a 2-mana 1/4 with Overheal Gain plus Attack. We got the Mana Geode, it's a 2-mana 2/3 Overheal summon a 2/2 Crystal. And we have Crimson Clergy, a 1-mana 1/3 overheal, draw a card. In case you don't know, the overheal mechanic is when you heal something and it exceeds the amount of health the card currently has, it will trigger this. So now, instead of hero powering and emoting, you can actually, say, heal your Mana Geode and get a 2/2 Crystal. And you'll notice that all of these minions are very cheap. 1 mana and 2/2 drops. And they have pretty good overheals. Overheal become a 3/4 overheal, draw a card, overheal summon a 2/2. Like, those are pretty good effects. It's just a matter of can we efficiently heal them. So let's go talk about the incoming cards from Festival of Legends and see how this overheal stuff is going to shake out. First, we've got the Fan Club. It's a 1-mana 2-use location. Restore 3 health to all friendly characters. If overheal cards are in your deck, this is in your deck. That's just one of the most efficient possible ways to trigger overheal. It's very good. So the value of this is entirely how good is this? And let's be honest, 1 mana heal 6 is just not bad. Like, this is still healing 6 on your main character, on your hero, for 1 mana at worst. This is a very good card and it's pushing overheal quite hard. Idol's Adoration is better in Shadow Priest, let's be honest. 1 mana 0/2 weapon, your hero power costs 0, after you use it, lose 1 durability. This is better if your hero power is something broken, like the Shadow Hero power. But it's also usable on overheal. This allows you to use your hero power on curve with a curve-costed minion. You can play a 3-drop and heal it immediately for that overheal effect, which is quite good. This is another way of setting up overheal on turn 1 immediately so that you can play out your overheal cards without losing much tempo to heal them in the first place. And then we get to Dreamboat, which is another way of healing cards. This isn't an overheal itself, but instead it's a 2-mana 1/2 with Battlecry, restore 3 health to all other friendly members. So it's a 2-mana 1/2 Naga that essentially fan clubs when he arrives, and he gains +1/+1 for each one overheal. That's not for each overheal minion he targets, but for everything that didn't need the healing he gained. Sadly, he doesn't hit face, but that's fine. Realistically, if you're playing this guy, you have other overheal minions, he's coming down on a board where he's pretty much guaranteed to be, at absolute worst, River Crocodilus that triggers an effect. Realistically, if you're able to play this with board control, this thing could be backbreaking. If you were winning board just barely and had 2 minions clinging to life on the board going into turn 4 and Dreamboat comes down, you probably win the game. There is a lot going on with like the tempo overheal stuff, where I believe there is a very viable all-in aggro deck on this overheal stuff that is pretty wild. We've also got Heartthrob, 3 mana 2/5 undead, overheal, summon a random minion with cost equal to the amount overhealed. This is the only overheal effect that cares how much did you heal the card by, and it's a big payoff for it. Heartthrob seems very, very strong. It's very good at fighting for board, is a great target for buffs, and there are a couple of buffs this deck is likely wanting to run. Generally speaking, it's just a good minion. It's not threatening to blow out the game the way the other stuff is just by having so much board presence early, but it is essentially just a bigger Mana Geode, right? Mana Geode's only giving you a 2/2. For 1 more mana, this guy has 2 more health and potentially gives you much, much more. So Heartthrob's just more of the same. He's good, Mana Geode's great, he's great, but he's not particularly exceptional in light of the other stuff this deck archetype is doing. And lastly, we have the legendary Heartbreaker Hedanis. He's a 4 mana 4/8, really a 4 mana 4/4 because of Battle Cry, deal 4 damage to this minion, and Overheal, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. Heartbreaker Hedanis is a lot better than he might initially look. You might be like, oh wow, you have to heal him for 5. That's a bit of a hassle, right? But it's not actually that hard to heal him. Here's the reason. For 5, that is exactly a flash heal, which is still in Chord. So for 5 mana, you can play a 4/8 with Battle Cry, deal 5 damage to a random enemy, discard a card, essentially. That's how playing a second card to combo this would work out. And that's a good minion. It's not insane, but it's definitely good. It's worth having at the top end of your curve to try to nail that coffin shut. And additionally, if you just play him on 4 with a Fan Club and an Adoration down, you can Fan Club, get everyone healed, trigger all your other Overheal effects, then Idol's Adoration him, and get him up to max health and trigger his ability. Heartbreaker Hedanis looks very, very good to me. I don't think he's the reason you play this. I think the big reason you play this is the potential for crazy early boards, and Heartbreaker Hedanis just comes in at the end and throws some damage at the enemies. He's not insane, but cards like him do need to be in the deck for the deck to pay off. That's it for the Overheal set, and I've been pretty straightforward that I think it's a very strong tempo package, and I expect to see an Overheal aggro deck that does some work. And there's one more card that would go into that deck out of these, which is Power Chord Synchronize. It's a 2 mana holy spell, choose a minion, add a copy of it to your hand, finally give both +1/+2. If you're fighting for board, +1/+2 is relevant. If you're using Overheal minions, getting a copy of them can be relevant, and in particular, getting a copy of Dreamboat can be devastating. Now, for the rest of this, let's start with the most hype card remaining, Love Everlasting. This thing's terrifying. 2 years from now, when this set's about to rotate, this will probably be one of the strongest cards to have come out of the set. But right now, it's not. Right now, there's really not a Control Priest deck that exists. We'll get more into this when Vicious Syndicate decks start getting referenced and I start talking about how the meta is going to change. Basically, every Control Priest deck that currently exists is about to get gutted, and except for this, they're not really getting very many new tools. So while this card is absolutely terrifying, did I even read what it does? 3 mana holy spell, your first spell each turn costs 2 less, lasts forever. Really, it lasts until you don't play a spell on your turn, but if you build your deck around this, it's going to last forever. And the main reason for that is because Sister Spawn exists, so you can guarantee that you always have a 3 mana Discover a card in your hand, and that will just make sure you never let Love Everlasting fall off. So while I think the card's very, very strong, I don't think there's really a home for it in the current expansion. I think it'll be fine in the decks it's played in, like it'll be one of the best cards in its deck, but unfortunately its deck doesn't seem like it's going to be one of the best decks to me. However, there are some more Control Priest cards getting printed. It's not alone. We have 3 mana Shadow Chord Distort, which is always important. This is a shadow control spell. The more of those there are, the more viable that archetype becomes. Anyways, it's a 3 mana shadow spell, gives a minion a -5/-5. Those are huge penalties. If it gets down to 0 attack, destroy it, and of course if it gets down to 0 health, you killed it the normal way. So that's a very good piece of removal, but unlike most removal, if you Fireball an 8/8, it's just an 8/2 now, it still hits you for 8. If you Shadow Chord Distort an 8/8, it's a 3/3 now. This is the only piece of removal in the game, currently at least, that has the ability to partially remove a minion. It's very good. I don't know if Control Priest is going to be viable, but if it is, I would be unsurprised to see Shadow Chord Distort in it. And likewise, I don't think there will ever be slow enough aggro Priest or aggro Undead Priest to justify running Distort, but if there were slower Undead Priest, this would definitely be in their decks. Speaking of Shadow Control spells, we have 4 mana Fight Over Me. Choose 2 enemy minions, they fight, add copies of any that die to your hand. So this is basically targetable Hysteria. It can never hit a full board. So Hysteria is better when your opponent has like 6 minions and one of them's an 8/8 and the rest of them are 2/2s. So you Hysteria the 8/8 and it just kills everything basically, right? In fact, I'll go so far as to say that Hysteria is just generally better than this, but Hysteria was a great card. That doesn't make this one bad. Getting the value of those cards makes it a little bit awkward, because a lot of the times you don't really want those cards. This can clog up your hand. The dream, right, is that you make like their level 5 Astalor fight their other decently sized enemy. They both die, you get an Astalor and another thing. You've cleared the board for 4 mana, you're doing great. Like, obviously it's clear what the hope is with Fight Over Me. But I think the reality is that it's bad Hysteria, and that's a good card. That's good enough to run in any deck that wanted Hysteria, because Hysteria is not in the format. But I don't think it's incredible. It is a good control tool. There have been better. It's not enough to push me towards a deck. It's not like Defile, where I'm like, oh shit, that's in the game. Control Warlock's on the table, boys. With Fight Over Me, I'm like, oh, that's a good tool. If I play a Control Priest, I'm probably looking at that. I legitimately thought I'd talked about all the cards, but it's just because I forgot this one existed. Admittedly, I've only known about it for a day and a half, but 6 mana Harmonic Pop is a holy spell. It deals 3 damage to all minions to summon a 6/6 Pop Star. Or, if it's swapped, it'll deal 6 damage to all minions and summon a 3/3 Pop Star. And like, this is a 6 mana control spell? What are we talking about? Why do we care about summoning any level of Pop Star? Just give me deal 6 damage to all minions and drop the entire second half of the text. I don't want any of it. Realistically, Harmonic Pop is just not a great card. I don't know who it's for. It doesn't fit neatly into any deck. It's really just there so that when Thief Rogue, which shouldn't be getting played, I'll cover that in the Rogue video. It's really just there so that I can tilt when Thief Rogue gets it and they line it up correctly with the right amount of damage to my board. Honestly though, this feels to me like there was a whiteboard during development, and for every class they wrote down Harmonic card, and then under Priest, somebody had wrote down Priest AoE. And in the last days of development, they're like, oh shit, Priest only has 1 card left. You have to do a Harmonic Area of Effect card. Are we supporting Control Priest? Just throw something together. No one cares. This feels like a card that's just there to check off some boxes. It's not gonna fit into any deck. It's not good. And something I should have mentioned when covering the core set, all these 1 mana 1/1s that are returning are also getting buffed up to 1/2s. This is basically because of Demon Hunter, but still, that did happen, and there are some more buffs that happen for Priest as well. Holy Nova's back to hitting face again, and the big one, Draconid Operative is a 4 mana 4/5 now, with the same effect he used to have. Battleground, you're holding a dragon, discover a copy of a card in your opponent's deck. That is a very pushed card. Draconid Operative is basically the only reason to play Dragon Priest right now. If there were more reasons, I would think Control Priest would exist, and I would specifically say Control Dragon Priest would exist. And I've theory crafted decks for that, and I've deleted them because I don't think they're going to do well. But I will say, of all the control decks, I'm the most optimistic for Control Dragon Priest. I think Draconid Operative is very good, and I think it gives you a reason to try to play that build. Alright, this is the part where we come to Vicious Syndicate and we talk about the Medic decks. I hope you're wearing your Sunday finest. I hope you're dressed in black. It's time to mourn. Basically, every one of these Priest decks is gone. Ultimate Cockroach Blessed Priest is a deck that in very large part does rely on Radiant Elemental, which has been removed, gutting the deck. Control Priest, the Plague variant, uses Xyrella, and that's not small, that's kind of a big deal. It's losing Meta, it's losing the other Xyrella. It was a very fringe deck in the first place, and the losses to its top end hurt it a lot, and it doesn't really receive any replacements. It's not unplayable, but it does get hurt in a big way, and I don't think it's going to really be worth playing. It also loses Light Maul Netherdrake and Najak Hexen. It's a little bit rough. It's not completely gutted like many other decks, but it is massively weakened, and it already wasn't very strong. Now, Quest Priest is losing the quest, so we're done here. We don't need to say anything else. But just for good measure, as always, we're losing some top end and some core stuff. We're losing Mutanus, we're losing Xyrella and Netherdrakes. It just hurts the deck a lot, but it doesn't really matter. Quest is gone, it's out. Swanna Priest is just dead. They removed Radiant Elemental, and that is literally the heart and soul of the deck. The whole deck is, what if Radiant Elemental said the only limit to my card caliber is my APM? Well, that was the promise. The real limit is Blizzard animation times. I'm shocked that after the 6-year hiatus or so that I took, there's not like a zip mode function that turns off animations or at least speeds them up. I am astounded that hasn't been implemented. And lastly, we have the one Priest deck listed on Vicious Syndicate that's not getting either outright killed or mostly gutted. It's Undead Priest. Don't get me wrong, they lose valuable things. They lose Shadowcloth Needle, but they also get a new 1-mana weapon that is worse, but totally viable. They lose Void Touch Descendant, and they don't really get a replacement for that, but they do get some new 2-drops they can run instead. And they have some old 2-drops that they weren't running, so they can still sort of fill out their curve. It's definitely a lot worse than having a proper 1-drop. And that does hurt them, but it's not completely crippling in and of itself. And they lose the Jack Hexen, but they also do get a very good 4-drop with Audio Engineer Pozic. And I don't think that Undead Priest loses too much. It does get weaker on the whole, I believe. However, despite that, a lot of other decks are losing more, and it was already a tier 1 deck. I expect that Undead Priest is going to remain very high up in the meta. I would be shocked if it falls beneath tier 2 with how strong it was in the previous month. Now, I will show my TempOverheal Priest that I'm planning on playing a lot of. I want to see how that goes. I think it's like a really powerful, even if very all-in aggro deck. This deck is definitely going to be viable. I don't feel the need to show my own because it's just this list with cuts and adds, right? Shadowcloth Needle rotates, you put in the new 1-mana weapon, you put in Idol's Adoration. It's worse, but it does a similar thing. Void Touch Descendant rotates, or sorry, Attendant rather. And there's no replacement, there's no similar 1-drop, no similar burn. You're going to be putting in something low on the curve to try to help out. For me, personally, I'll be going with Cult Neophyte, but whatever you pick. And then lastly, you lose Hexen, you put in Audio Engineer Pozic. Don't believe the haters, he is Dr. 4. No one playing against Undead Priest has the time to play 6 mana of vanilla 3/3s. So Undead Priest will stick around in almost exactly this form. This is the TempOverheal Priest list that I'm looking at running when the expansion hits. I'm really hyped in this deck, I'm really interested in this deck. But before I get into it, I really want to talk about the flavor win that is this deck. This is a boy band, right? Like these characters, Heartbreaker Hedanis, Heartthrob, Dreamboat, they're literally members of a boy band, they have a fan club, and some of the cards that we're adding to this deck are so flavorfully appropriate. Tour Guide being added to the core set during Festival of Legends is great. It deserves to be in this deck for every conceivable reason. That's a noted anti-synergy. You don't want to play Tour Guide and Idol's Adoration at the same time. They sort of waste each other. But they're also both 1-mana cards that get used within 2 turns, so it shouldn't be too hard to time them out to not be a problem. Additionally, it's just canonical that Heartbreaker Hedanis is using shadow magic to compel people to be his fans, and that he's kind of, a psychopath. So I really enjoy that Clear Conscience can fit in this deck, because if I'm playing for board, a card that says my opponent's hard removal doesn't work, a card that says I get to make favorable trades, these are the sorts of things I think fit into the deck. Simultaneously, I think Clear Conscience is one of the cards I'm most likely to take a good look at and realize it's not working and need to cut when I start playing this more. But this is the overheal list. You have all these ways of cheating out heals with Fan Club, Flash Heal just for a big efficient heal, Idol's Adoration and Tour Guide. Dreamboat as well is a great area effect heal, and for removal we have Cannibalize, which is also an AoE heal to trigger this, and again Sunfury Clergy for another area effect heal to all of our dudes. Holy Champion should be down in our 2-drops, but they're an old card that was reworked, so they're in the wrong spot right now. That's why the decks I've been showing are wild, by the way, is because some cards aren't available in Standard on the Hearthstone deck builder just yet. We got Crimson Clergy, Mana Geode for our actual early plays, and this is where the deck starts to actually fall apart and be dog shit, and I realize that it's not going to work. I'm gonna have to make some cuts somewhere, looking at you, Clear Conscience, to put some other early minions in the deck. Because in terms of curve minions that you play initially, it's Mana Geode and Crimson Clergy, and that's it. I could have sworn there were more 2-drops. Oh yeah, Holy Champion. That helps a lot. It's still not enough. The fact that Dreamboat doesn't want to get played unless you've already got a minion from your 1-drop is a little bit awkward. The curve needs work. I think it can get there. I think there's a deck similar to this that does the job. It has the potential to just snowball over so many boards. But at the same time, I think if this ever gets off the ground, much like I'm not very hyped about Kangor Paladin, I think this deck, if people realize this is a thing, they're going to see Priest. If it's actually viable and good like I hope it is, they're just going to hard mull for removal, and no matter how inefficient it is, they're going to remove every single card you play immediately so that you can't be doing gross stuff like Dreamboating multiple minions. But I'm really interested in seeing how this deck shapes up. It has a strong top end with Pozic and Hedanis in our 4-drop, Cannibalize to trigger our abilities while bulldozing through enemy minions. It's very, very scary, and some version of TempOverheal Priest will likely see some play. I think this one's too greedy. I've got too much AoE healing, Flash Heal is probably too much. I need to cut those, maybe need to cut Clear Conscience for some more early curve minions. But I will be playing some version of TempOverheal Priest because the deck is just completely new, completely different, and very interesting to me. In my heart, I think of myself as a combo player, and I wish I liked control decks, but I don't, and I tend to enjoy mid-range decks. But then I talk about what decks I like playing, I'm like, my curve ends at 4. And I kind of have to come to grips with the fact that maybe I'm an aggro player. I don't know, I really enjoy decks that are this simple and streamlined in their goals. This one needs more curve minions, it needs some refining. But it shows off what I'm hyped about when I talk about this. With cards like Mana Geode and Holy Champion running away with the board as you play cards like Dreamboat, Heartthrob can stick to the board and threaten monstrous things with any heals from hand, and you have plenty of ways to do that. Like a perfectly reasonable way this game can start is you play Idol's Adoration, then on turn 2 you play Mana Geode and heal it, right? You have a guaranteed free hero power next turn, and going into turn 3 you have a River Croc and a 2/2. That's completely fine. You can slam Heartthrob, heal them that, now you have a 2/5 and a random 2-drop. You can very easily generate boards with this very quickly, and the only thing that you have to worry about is how consistently do you do it. And it's probably worth cutting some of the weaker minions to more consistently have, not some of the weaker minions, there are no weak minions, this is running like every minion it can. It's probably worth cutting some of the weaker spells and some of the weaker top end to more reliably hit 1-drops and 2-drops, because if this doesn't snowball the board, the deck loses, period, end of story. So it needs a better curve than this has, this is too emaciated. But I've been rambling about this for far too long. I've been rather coherent. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about Priest, why I'm hyped for Overheal, why I'm worried about Control. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. All that stuff really does help the channel grow, and I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.